In life, there are moments that are critical to forward progress. Join executive coach and corporate trainer Scott Sadler as he learns about the seemingly small pivots successful people make in life and leadership that lead to big results. And now here's your Pivot Moment host, Scott Sadler.
Welcome to Pivot Moment. I'm here with Becky Gardinier from Cherry City Interior and Designs. I was going to say from Salem, but she also is the owner and partner in a very successful interior design and supply company, which we have frequented a little too often over the past couple of years with our kitchen remodel. And Becky is going to talk to us about some pivot moments in her life. And I've known Becky for many years, and Becky is a mom first and a very successful, strong businesswoman second. And I want to say hello and welcome to Becky. Hi, Becky.
Good morning.
Still is morning. It feels like the afternoon to me today. It is a Monday, though.
That's true.
So, as you know, Becky, we talk about these moments of pivoting in our lives and on this show. And when I first asked you about this, can you just tell me, and maybe it's not your topic of the day even, but what was the first thing you came up in your mind when I said, we're doing this thing called Pivot Moments, and I'd love for you to come on and share a moment or two where you had that aha, where you had that decision locked in, where you just went, I need to pivot away from this and towards something else. What was that came up for you?
It's so funny because it was, well, which one? I think that was probably for me. And I started reflecting back and thinking, holy cow, I've had a lot of really big moments that have truly changed the trajectory of my life. And so it was, my first initial one was a couple of things that have happened in our business. But then as I started thinking more about it, it was really the tie-in for me of some personal moments mixed with those business moments and how truly intertwined they've been for me. So I've got all kinds.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting? I talk a lot with my clients about separating, about how we've separated our professional lives and our personal lives, and how that's not really the case anymore. We need to encourage our true selves to be present in both of those roles. So it's interesting you reflect back on that, because so many times we're told, well, you have to be this at work and you have to be this at home. And I know you're the same person 24/7. And that's quite an accomplishment. Maybe that's why you started your own business, right? You could be that person. So, well, talk to us about something that's come up for you then that was a pivotal moment, either personally or professionally or intertwined.
I think honestly, one of the biggest ones was starting Cherry City. Initially, Leslie, my business partner, and we'd worked together doing sales before. And you were right in that 2008, 2009, when that recession just nailed the construction industry. And being on the sales end of that and watching the business that we worked for not react to it was pretty shocking, but also scary, because you're not in the driver's seat. At that point, your path is really decided by what your employer's doing. And I think we had this opportunity, Leslie and I did, where it was take the knowledge that we have the clientele, they were going to go under and start our own business. And that's really what we did. But when you think about, there's a fear component to any big decision. And if we had allowed that fear to dictate, there's no way we would have moved forward with it. But I think we both sort of had this resolve that this is the best path and we're going to make it work. And we had feedback from, my spouse, friends, anybody that knew us said, well, what are you doing? This is the worst time to start a business. And I think for me, it was, well, what do you mean? This is the best time to start a business, because we're starting out the bottom. You can only go up. We know that our clients are going to be loyal to us. So I think it was more of that mindset of making it work, and we've made it work. So that was a big one.
Well, you've done it. You've made it work more than you've made it a lot more than just making it work. You're truly a success story, and you continue to during these COVID times. I know from speaking with you that you're continually pivoting in business and always looking for that next. Do you think you're a quick pivot? Do you think that was learned, or did that start when you were younger? Tell me a little bit about how quick you are to pivot and how that process works for you.
Honestly, I think I have always been pretty quick to pivot. I think for me, I moved out of my house before I graduated high school. I moved out when my junior year was starting. So I've been on my own, but I've always had, as my husband says, sort of a ridiculous self-belief. And it's not any, I don't know.
I like that.
I've just been not overly confident, but just, I know that I'm scrappy. I'll make it work. I'll figure out a way. And if it's going south, then we just redirect. And so I think that for me, when you think about big decisions, pivot moments, it's more of a mindset. It's getting ahead of things, getting ahead of a consumer instead of, you hear this, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And for me, that's a scary mentality to have, because why wouldn't you want to be progressive and have sort of a fluid mindset where I'm a planner and I'm going to put a plan in place, but nothing ever seems to go according to plan. So it's, instead of, hey, here's my plan, it's, well, what does plan B, plan C, plan D look like? Maybe it's a better option. And I think that for me has just, it's a mindset for sure. And I'll make the best out of whatever.
And you're pre-planning your pivots, right?
Yeah.
You're knowing the experience you've had with those turning points and looking forward and knowing that you're going to have to pivot again. Yeah. And that's one thing that, I think that many people don't understand is you don't just get in a lane and go straight. Life is curly and life moves different directions. And that's where the pivot mindset, I think, is so interesting to me, to talk to professionals and just anyone in life has got to have a pivot moment, even if it was forced upon them, where it was a bad situation and it just got to the point where they said, I have to pivot out of this. Have you had any of those bad situations that you want to talk about that you pivoted away from? I mean, you've talked a lot about the successes of starting a business at the right time and pivoting in business, but talk to me a little bit about some negative situation, and you don't have to go into personal details or anything, of course, but where you pivoted out of something and looked back and went, if I hadn't, oh my gosh, what could have happened?
Truly, that's where probably that personal side comes in, and divorce. I think you talk about divorce, and unless someone's gone through it, they just have no idea, but it's very common. And I think having a supportive partner, it's critical, I think, in a lot of ways, to just sort of emotionally feeling like you're supported, feeling like you can go out and do whatever you need to do. And I was in a marriage that was not good for me. And starting the business, it required sacrifice. And if you are with someone who it has to be about them, or there's more of a selfish component there, they don't understand sacrifice. They don't understand that, hey, decisions you're making are for your future. It becomes a toxic scenario. And I think that's what my marriage was for me. And so making the decision that the only way that I am going to be my true self, be truly happy, and be truly successful, personally, professionally, whatever that looks like, I have to get out. And it was a brutal decision to make. My kids were little, but it's the best decision that I made for me. And so I think that would definitely be the negative that has turned into, my goodness, my best self, if you want to call it that, where I'm at now.
That really hits home. And I'll tell my story another time, but I have a similar story to that. It was with a business partner, and it was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. But I think that sometimes, you're looking, something's not quite right, but the moment hasn't come for you to go, oh my gosh, this is the moment I need to grasp, and this is the time I need to go. And so many people stay in that. It doesn't come, right? Or it's there and they don't want to see it. And in my coaching work, that's a lot of what I do, is help people with their own self-awareness. What do you really want? And I loved what you said. I'm not gonna get it right, but you said something like, I'm true to myself. I'm living the best life. I'm happy. And isn't that what life is supposed to be?
Well, and I think this sacrifice piece, we're so wired, especially women, moms, the guilt complex, we're so wired that we have to sacrifice ourselves. And why is that? Because I think for me, I look at my kids and I look at how I hope that they end up as adults. And I hope that they're true to themselves. But if I'm not true to myself, how can I expect them, right? They need to see that example. And so I think the courage to make the change and the fear of what that looks like on the other side keeps so many people in situations. And it's how do you push past that fear to see how great it could be on the other side? And for me, the divorce was probably the biggest piece of that, but I think it's pushing past the fear. You know the fear is there, but don't be scared of it. Embrace it and say, okay, if I jump off this cliff, it could be an amazing thing, but you got to jump.
Yeah. And you've got good support, and this is where many people struggle if they don't have support or they don't think they have support. And of course, your negative pivot out of that pivot from your previous marriage led you to where you are now in your current marriage, right?
Yes,
and you are you couldn't have been there without that process.
Absolutely. And I think when you go through the challenges, you appreciate the good so much more. And I would say I've always been a positive person, but now the priorities, they've shifted. Everything's shifted. Even in business, when you look at what's important, well, it's, are our employees happy, right? You want the business to grow. You want to be successful and have that financial success too. But there's so much more to it than that. And so I think the more you go through and see, it just broadens your view of things. You look through a different lens, if you will.
Yeah. And, when you said, you weren't in alignment with your true self, your happiness, your peace, that is not a selfish statement, folks. And it is all about, if you're in that place, then you can help others be in the place that's right for them. But if you're constantly trying to, how do I put it? If you're constantly in a state of fear or unhappiness, then that's a sign. That's a sign for you to pivot. You need to look for those pivot moments when you're in that space, because when you do, those opportunities will open up to you. It's the same in business, right? There's been so many ups and downs in business in my 30 years, and you go through the downs, you just waiting for that pivot. I'm just looking for that place. And you got to believe that it's there, because if you don't, it's not going to show up, right? You'll just be stuck.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, and it's kind of a funny thing, but I have a fortune cookie from who knows how many years back. And it's, in chaos lies opportunity. And I truly am such a believer in that, because we have gone through some super crazy stuff in our business story. But in those crazy times, if you're able to have perspective, you see this opportunity and it's like, okay, we're going to jump on that. And it ends up opening doors that you never in your wildest dreams would have thought possible. And I think you get to that place and it's almost like, okay, choose your own adventure. Now what are we going to do?
Right. Yeah. I think that's a good piece of advice, by the way, that, you can't always see what's coming, but you can expect it to be better than your expectations. And that's always worked really well for me anyway. And if you're not able to get past the fear to see that it's going to be better, then you're just on this linear path of, stress and suffering, and whether it be in business or your personal life. So talk to me a little bit more about your kids, how you're modeling this. That piqued my interest. I made a little note here to come back to that, because I'm such a fan of mentoring and helping kids and helping them find happiness earlier, so that they're not having to go through. And we're not going to our backstories, but Becky and I have a very similar upbringing, and I'd like for kids to kind of avoid some of those things. And how are you teaching your kids and modeling this for them, and how are they responding?
It's interesting, especially right now. It's such a weird time. You've got all the COVID stuff. So it's kind of, okay, I told the kids, I said, right now we might just kind of be surviving, not necessarily thriving, but we're going to get through this. But I think for me, being raised the way that I was, it definitely gave me a unique perspective, I think, on parenting. My dad was very strict, and we worked a lot. And I think that the work component has definitely carried through. but my dad was a control freak in every sense of the manner. And I think a lot of us are hardwired to be very controlling, especially in business, right? You have to maintain a certain level of control over things to be successful. But what does that really look like? If you're able to sort of let go of pieces and let people give people enough rope to hang themselves, right? We hear that saying. And I'm such a firm believer in that with the kids too, and with our employees. If the more you empower people to learn things on their own, instead of dictating, well, you have to do it this way. You got to, well, maybe they have a better way, and being okay knowing, hey, I don't know everything. There's people smarter than me. There's people more successful than me, or maybe people that just think differently. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's just letting the kids do their thing within boundaries. You know, I definitely am pretty, if you call me a strict parent in certain ways, and definitely not in other ways. But I feel like my kids are great. We communicate a lot. That's another big thing. And that for me is, I want to make sure their cup is full on the emotional side of things. So yeah, I mean, I feel good about where they're at and where I'm at.
Yeah, you mentioned allowing kids to discover their own journeys, and it's not just for kids, right? If you're an adult that hasn't had that opportunity, start today and use the creativity. I think that's one thing that's lost in many youth today. If they're told to do things one way, they're not using that part of their brain that allows problem solving and creativity to the highest degree, and find their happiness. Their happiness may be something different than what their parents had brought to them. And then that translates to the workforce eventually, because they may have to learn something completely different in relationships or at work. You're a really good mom. I know that you spend a lot of time with them and work out and walk and you're modeling what you'd like to see them do, which is think for themselves, make their decisions, and push the envelope a little bit. Don't be afraid. Be afraid of change. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, talk to me a little bit about how a woman in the construction industry has done. And I think before we got on the call, Becky and I were talking about women's the place in history where women sit right now, and it's such exciting times. Ingrid and I watched a PBS special called The Vote, and it was fascinating to me that it took 67 years for women to get the right to vote. We're talking about daughters of mothers who started the movement just to get the right to vote, and that put in perspective for me. It's always been in perspective, but that really put it on a timeline for me on the struggles that are still go on with women in the workplace. And I work with a lot of women as clients who have similar situations, problems with just gender being a label that seems to get in the way. And I know that, you're one of the strongest women, business women that I know.
Thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about that, and how would you encourage young women who are starting out, or even women who are still struggling in today's world, on how to navigate that?
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up, because it's something that I've thought about a lot, especially when you have a teenage daughter and you're going through all the hormonal stuff. You're just like, oh, geez, how do I help her just be confident and love herself? And it's a tough thing. I think for me, I grew up as a worker, grew up on a farm, and there was no distinction. It didn't matter if you were a girl or not. You better get that work done. And so growing up, gender was never a thing for me. And it wasn't until I started doing sales that I really realized what a disadvantage I was at, because I was young. So right there, that I'm at a disadvantage because I was in my 20s and I'm female, and I'm in a construction industry trying to meet contractors and explain to them why they need to be buying flooring from me and not Joe Schmo down the street. When you think about the floor covering industry, we're starting to see this shift, but it is a good old boy network. I mean, all your mills are out of Georgia. It's total male dominated, and it's so fascinating because it's design. You're talking about surfaces in a woman's home. The woman she's our customer. It's not the man. And so it's just a very interesting dynamic. But once I could tap into the advantage that I had, it was a total game changer for me, because it came down to, would you rather work with Joe Schmo, or would you rather work with me? I can give you the same pricing, so competitive pricing, my service is going to be better, and I can offer you design. I actually care about what you're doing, and I want to make sure it looks good in your customer's home. So who do you want to work with? And once I could propose it in that type of a scenario, I think there was a definite shift, because it was, what's my value added for them? And then once they started working with me and seeing that, hey, I actually knew what I was talking about on the technical side, then everything shifted. So then everybody wanted to start working with us instead of us having to just fight for the customers. So it's, instead of viewing it as a disadvantage, it's, what's your advantage? You got to flip the script. And I would encourage any female to do that, because we're at a huge advantage, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, and Becky's not going to say it, but I will. Her and Leslie take no crap.
No.
So, yeah, there is that piece too, right? You're not going to tolerate or put up with any mistreatment of yourselves, your employees, or your vendors, and you're strong. And I think those folks who are listening who maybe don't feel like they're strong, you have it in you. Yeah. You just have to make a decision of where your boundaries are, and to start making changes and watching for those pivot opportunities that we're talking about in this process.
Well, and we've got a great story of a gal that works for us, and she's totally lets us talk about her. But when she started doing sales with us she's probably in her mid-20s, and she would cry all the time. Oh man, the contractors, the installers, they would just steamroll her. And it got to the point where we would just work with her, bring her up. Okay, what do you think you should have done here? And really help kind of mentor her into, where are your boundaries? You can be professional, but you got to stand your ground, or these guys are going to run you over.
That's right.
And now she is one of our most successful project managers, and she is not taking anything from anyone, let me tell you. So it's been about a 5-year process for her, but we talk about it and just her journey and her path. So I say, if she can do it, anybody can. And she's a force to be reckoned with now. So it's just tapping into that and really being okay, just standing your ground. No, there's my line. I'm just not going to let you go past it.
What a great thing you've done for her personally, because they're talking about helping her on the job, but that spills over to every aspect of her life when it comes to boundaries and confidence and belief in herself. So that's great. I know that you and Leslie are doing a good job with helping all your team. I know that's the number one thing for you is your team, and helping them be successful. So are there any other pivot moments that you want to touch on? Something significant?
Like I have all kinds.
I know.
I would say one was, it wasn't necessarily a decision that I made. It was an opportunity that came from decisions that I made, but it changed my perspective a bit on, already I try to think I'm pretty open-minded about things, but I had been serving on what's called a dealer council for one of our large vendors, and they you're meeting with other floor covering dealers in the United States and Canada. And it's just an amazing opportunity to interface. And it's kind of a think tank, get feedback from other dealers. And I'd been working with them for probably close to 2 years. And it's a company that's owned by Warren Buffett, by Berkshire Hathaway. And they gave me a call one day and said, hey, we've got this conference coming up, and Warren is going to be there. It's our anniversary, and we would like you to interview him in front of thousands of people. And it was, well, I'm definitely not going to say no to that. It'd be my dream, right? But they said, okay, well, we want to know, we want one really good question from you. What do you want to ask him? And it's interesting when you start thinking about that, and you think about someone that's achieved that level of success, but also what he has seen from an economy standpoint, our society standpoint. I just was fascinated by how someone can be so adaptable and open. You have to be open to change to be that successful. And so that was my question for him. And just talking with him was so interesting, because he just said, things change, people change, things change, and you just make the best decisions you can. And here I am, I'm looking at Warren Buffett, I'm thinking, holy cow, this guy, but he was saying, you just simplify things down to a way you can understand them and grasp them. And then nothing is out of reach at that point. And I thought, wow, that is so simple, but such great advice. If we can sort of keep that mentality that things that are so abstract to us, maybe it's just how we're viewing them. Can we simplify it down, bring it back in to a place where, no, I can wrap my head around that. What are my steps to get there? And suddenly, really nothing's out of reach at that point. So I would say that was a good shift for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about situations myself where I've reached out and broke it down to be simple. And then the time goes by. 5 years later, you're like, oh my gosh, you got to start somewhere, but the time will just fly by. And if you stay on those simple steps, I love that advice. Change is always around us. Mm-hmm. And if we can learn how to deal with change, then those pivot moments, when they show up, you'll be able to take advantage of them instead of staying stuck. So what a great opportunity you had to meet with one of the most successful people of all time.
Yeah. But I think it's so true. And I look at the situation that we're in now, just the times in general, things are shifting so much. You've got COVID from a business perspective. Everybody's got to shift. From a parenting perspective, everybody's got to shift, personally shift. And it's almost like our society, everyone, no matter what their view, how much they want to change, don't want to change, everybody is forced to change right now. And so it's a very interesting time, because you start seeing if people have the ability to look at the silver linings and try to stay positive, because you can't control what's happening. And it's too big. But to be able to stay positive, and you even look at the silver linings that you're hearing from people like, wow, I'm spending more time with my family. Wow, my employer never would have considered a work at home as an option, and now they are. So there's all of these pieces that I feel like if we can focus on those versus, well, we got to wear masks. Well, who cares? Just really have that bigger picture perspective, and things will fall into place.
Right. And I'd add that you'll be a lot happier people.
Yeah.
So, don't get stuck in the minutia, because it's basically all minutia. And so take that higher level perspective and keep looking for those pivot points. Mm-hmm. Becky, thank you so much for coming on today, and appreciate it. I'll have you back, because I know how many pivot stories you have to share. And just a reminder, everybody, pivot forward, pivot backwards, pivot sideways, but always be pivoting, looking for the change to better your life and your work, and be good humans. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Becky.
Hey, sounds great. Thanks, Scott.